welcome to another McBike and Sport fly tying video. And in this video we're going to be tying a variation of a Steelhead Muddler, sort of my own take on things. First thing we're going to do is we'll start with some Glow Bright number 5 floss. And we'll just start that towards the back of the hook. And we're going to use that as a tag, so we'll put a little bit on there, clip it off, and we're going to run that back to about the barb of the hook, let's say, and then just bring it back up till just about a little bit in front of the point. And then what we're going to do, we'll get some Danville's 210 in orange, so we want a nice strong thread here for our spinning our deer hair portion of things. So just start that up. So these are great muddlers, by the way, this time of the year. Sort of the start of the steelhead season. Water's nice and warm, weather's good. Good time to be out dry fly fishing or waking skating flies, that sort of thing. So these you can either riffle hitch it and sort of skate it, or you can fish it what some people call damp, or basically just sort of subsurface. But really fun to see that the fish hit them. So we're just going to tie in a piece of orange ultra wire in size small. Bring our thread back, tie that in on the way down until we come in line with that Glow Bright. Okay, so we're just going to catch, once we get to the end here, we're just going to catch in our Glow Bright floss. Okay, bring your thread forward in a couple nice open wraps, and that's just so we're not going to build up too much bulk for our body. We're going to have a tinsel body. Cut off your Glow Bright. Next you're going to get your body. We're going to use a holographic gold tinsel, and we're going to tie that. So I find a lot of times you tie these in a little longer than you want, and then you can just sort of pull it back to where you want the front to line up. In this case I'm just going to line it up with the return eye. So we're going to bring this back, tie it in until we're just in line with that tag, obviously, and then wrap your thread forward. Try and keep nice tight close wraps so we can have a decent looking underbody, although mostly it's going to get covered up, not that big a deal. Okay, so do your first wrap round. If you want to be a little more protective, you can apply a layer of super glue on the shank first if you want, just to give this a little more staying power. We are going to counter wrap with wire just to give it a little more durability, because the mylar tinsels themselves, to get a few cut-ups on some teeth. If you get maybe some trout hitting this, or steelhead even, it'll shred it up a bit. So wrap that forward, tie it off. Just a couple wraps because we'll use the rest of it to deal with our wire. So like I said, counter wrap your wire opposite direction that you put your body on. And this will just give your fly a little bit more durability. Not really adding much for weight to this fly, you don't have to worry about that. Okay, tie that off. Couple wraps. And then bend and break off your wire. Clip off your tinsel. Okay, and we're ready for the next portion. So now, Steelhead Muddler normally has some crystal flash. You could definitely do that, either say like a gold or a copper crystal flash. In this case, what I'm going to actually use is this, I think it's called microlateral scale. It's a very crinkly, flashy type material. I like it. Okay, so I'm just going to grab 2 strands of it, lay them down on the side, fold them over the top, and lay it down the far side. Okay, and then we're just going to cut that to length. You want to go about back of the hook shank, or back of the bend. So just gather that all up, clip that off where you want it, right about the back of the bend. Okay, so it's going to give just a little bit of a track tip. Now here's where we vary from the sort of a steelhead muddler other than our tag. Normally, of course, you'd have a turkey tail wing. What I'm going to actually use is a purple polar bear for the wing. So again, really nice translucent material. Cut it off as close to the skin as you can. We're not going to use a lot, keep it fairly sparse. Pull out all of this under fur. Then what I find is easiest to do, I'm just going to leave it rough like that. I'm not going to worry about lining it up too much. I'm going to go about the back of the hook bend again, and I like to sort of pre-measure. I find it easier than applying it and then trying to cut the tips off later. So I'm going to pre-measure, line that up, pinch wrap to get it right on the top, and hold it tight. We're not wanting this to roll or reposition off to the side a little bit as we tie it in. Okay. If you want to find you're slipping off like that, get a little bit of fly tires wax. Does a world of good. Okay. And there's our wing in there. Now at this point, I find polar bear is a very slippery material. It doesn't tend to stay put very well. I like to throw on just a little bit of head cement. Let it soak into the wraps, polar bear, everything. And then that's not going to pull out. Of course, the other way you can tie it in reverse doesn't really work with this pattern that tends to build up a little too much in front. We are going to be spinning some deer hair on here, so we don't really want to build up this area too much. It's going to be difficult enough as it is to get our deer hair to roll on this first little portion. Okay, so next material we're going to tie in is just a little tiny bit of teal flank. Okay, I've already prepared this one. Stripped one side. I just like the way it lays down better when you strip one side of teal as opposed to trying to tie in the entire feather. And if I wasn't doing this on a video, I may let that bit of head cement dry a little longer, but in this case we're not going to. So go, and we're not going for much here, we just want kind of a little veiling, a little bit of action from the, I think just one wrap ought to do the trick. So I'm just going to pinch off this extra bit, tie that off. Keep your tension on your thread always. Tie that down nice and tight. Lock it off and snip off your excess. So you can see now we've got just a little bit of veiling from the teal, and unfortunately you can see we've kind of built up a fair surface here, and there's not a lot you can do about that when you're trying to tie a fly like this with a number of different things, especially when you're using a larger thread. I mean, I guess you could have started with a smaller thread and switched up if you really wanted to, but I'm not too worried about it. I'll show you how to sort of, one way to spin deer hair when you've got something tough like this, and the other way is not to even bother spinning at all. So this is some orange deer hair, deer belly hair. Why belly? Mostly because the belly is white hair, and so it dyes these more vivid, brighter colors when you want it to. So we're going to pinch off enough to do up our collar of our muddler, and we don't want this too heavy because we do want it to show through. So again, if you just twist that a little bit in your fingers, you can see how it opens up. That makes pulling out all the under fur just a little bit easier. Do want to try and get as much of that out of there as you can. Okay, grab your stacker, place those in tip first into your stacker, and give it a good whack on your desk. Okay, got your tips lined up, pull the works out. Now what we're going for here is basically, let's pull out these stragglers. We want a collar with the tip ends coming back to about the tag is where I like a little bit hanging off the back. So what we're going to do in order when we go to trim this later, keep everything separate, I find it easier if I give this a bit of a trim now. I'm going to trim it just there. Okay. That's going to keep these hairs separate from the longer collar hairs so that it'll make it easier for me to do the trimming. So now what we're going to do, loose wrap, 1, 2 loose wraps, 3. Now because this is thick, you'll see it's not going to spin very easily, so what I'm actually going to do is spin it with my fingers as I tighten. Make sure I get all the way around, okay, and then just tighten down on that. And you should get that nice flare on the front. Okay, a few wraps, pull everything back, and give it a couple wraps there on the front just to lock it all back. And you can see now when I was talking about our collar length is longer than our cut hair length. It's going to make that easier to sort out and trim. And I've purposely left quite a bit of room at the head, and that's if for you choose to riffle hitch this fly, you've got the room to tie your hitch. So now what we're going to do, the other way to do deer hair, when you've got something thick like this that isn't going to cooperate, it's not a bare shank, is to basically kind of clump it on and force it through. So grab another clump of deer hair, get as much of the underfur out as you can. You can also use, some people use a little mini comb for this. I just like to work it out with my fingers, but that's another way to do it. It's actually a very effective way if you have a fine comb to do this. Okay, this time we're going to put it in the hair stacker. I'm going to put it in cut ends first because I'm not really worried about lining up the tips. I actually want to line up each of these ends. I'm just going to pop the top off my stacker, and there's all my ends lined up. Come to the other side, clip it off on this end. Okay, so I've just basically got a little tiny bundle, if you will, of deer hair. I'm going to place that on the top. Oops. A pinch on there. Loose wrap. And now what I'm going to do this time is I'm actually going to force this just like this. Wiggle it back and forth, get it all around the hook before I do my tightening, and then cinch down hard. Spin through. Okay. Couple. Pull it back. Pull it all back. 1 wrap in the front, or 2 to hold it all back. And then depending how big a head you want, you can go ahead and do another stack or not. I'm just going to tie on a little bit more. Wouldn't mind a little bit more in front there. Let's do the same thing. Clip off a little piece. And when you're clipping these, always clip nice and tight to the hide. Just makes it easier when you go to get your next bunch. You've always got an edge to work from. Now, of course, you can tie these in colors other than this too. Your traditional muddler is more of a brown deer hair color. And you can certainly do that. I just wanted something that was a little bit brighter. Makes a good sort of, I think, attractant fly. If you get a bit of a player on this one, but isn't fully going for it, then you can go back with something smaller in a more neutral color, like a brown or a black. Small dry fly, perhaps in black, would be good to go back to them with. But I just find this is good for getting attention. Okay, same thing. Pinch wrap, not too tight, nice and loose. Okay, and then move it around a little farther that time. Okay, and cinch hard, pull it. A couple wraps through. Now we may have crowded that a little bit much, so we're going to push this back, stack it as hard as we can, and we're going to try and keep a nice small head up here, leave enough room for tying off the hitch if we want to hitch this fly. Don't worry about these little, you can just kind of break off deer hair like that. Okay, at this point we are going to do up our whip finish. pushed everything back, so we should hopefully not catch too much. Well, there we go, one right away. 1, 2, 3. Okay, now normally I would put my head cement on now and then let that dry up, the head cement, let it set before I went about trimming. But for the sake of the video, we're going to do our trimming now. So next thing I'm going to do, I would have liked a little better separation there, but that's what I got. Start with our trimming. I find a pair of curved scissors really does help. The other thing which helps quite a bit is a rotary vise. So we're just going to start with a pretty rough trim, not taking off a ton of material. You can always take more off, obviously you can't put it back, so don't go too deep to start. And really we're just trying to differentiate our collar from the rest of our fly at this point. Kind of hold your fingers on the collar if you want. Come in. Get those stragglers out of there. So one thing you can do is if you take your collar, hold it down with your fingers, and then you can kind of just run your scissor up in and along there, and that'll get you right in tight to where you want to be. And this is where the curved scissors really come in handy, I find, because you can just lay them on top. And they do a nice sort of rounding job. Okay, so now we've done our rough trim. Next thing we want to do is give this a bit of shape. And what we're looking to do here is if you come in right with your tips of your scissors on an angle, we're just going to try and give this a bit of a taper. It's going to come around a bit to the side. I'm going to give this a bit of a taper from the front. And this again where your rotary vise really comes in handy. And then we're just going to give it a bit of a taper to the back and then kind of square it off through here. And you can of course shape these however you would like to shape them, but this is the way I do it. It's not like we're making a bomber. We haven't packed this in super tight, but the deer hair is designed to give it some flotation, right? So. And this is why I like to get that head cement first on there. We see we've got a little straggler hanging out the front. Okay, so you can spend a little more time on that, of course, cleaning it up. Okay, so there you go. We've got our Steelhead Muddler variation, big variation, of course. We've got the purple polar bear wing instead of the turkey tail. A bit of a hot floss tag just to give them a little bit more to focus on, and the orange instead of the more traditional colors. Good fly, I think, for these early steelhead season days when the water's warm, the weather's nice, the sun's out. Give them something they can see. You can either riffle hitch this or you can fish it sort of just damp subsurface on a dry line. So have fun out there, and always, of course, check out our website, McBike.ca, where you can find our contact info, purchase materials if you can't find them in your local area, or if you're in the Bulkley area for steelhead fishing this fall, come and see us.